Hey guys, Greg Nuckols here with stringtheory.com, and today we have the first installment of a new series I'm doing for this channel. Theoretically, I'm going to be back on YouTube more. I know that's something I've said in the past, hasn't really stuck. Don't really like talking to a camera, but I'll be a big boy and suck it up. Working on finishing up the second editions of my books, The Art and Science of Lifting, right now, and that's what's eating up most of my time. So I don't have all that much time to put out, kind of lengthy articles that are typical for string theory. Just they take a long time to write. It's a lot quicker and easier to put out videos. So that's what I'm going to be doing for a while, just to try to keep putting out content, not just drop off the face of the earth entirely. So how this is going to work is theoretically every day. That's what I'm aiming for. I'm going to put out a video just answering the best question that I've been asked in the past 24 hours. This one I solicited from Facebook, but in the future, just comment on this video with a question you would like answered, and it may be the one that I address in the next video. But yeah, so and for the most part, I'm going to be looking for more practical questions. There will be some theoretical stuff, mechanistic stuff, but for the most part, these are going to be videos addressing kind of more specific questions about how you can improve your training. So starting off with this one, the question was basically, what's my take on the overhead press, military press, shoulder press, whatever you call it, for bench press? Does it have a good transfer? Is that a good accessory lift for the bench press? And so, in general, I do think that the overhead press is a good movement just in its own right in general, but I think for most people it's not that good of an accessory lift for the bench press, but for some people it can be a really good lift. So kind of to address those people first, for most people, the sticking point of the bench press is in the mid-range. That's where most people tend to miss a bench press. Not that many people just miss right coming off their chest. Not a ton of people miss at lockout. Most people miss through the mid-range. However, for the people who do miss just when the bar's breaking their chest, so maybe it doesn't move at all, maybe it just moves an inch or two but doesn't really get to that mid-range position, that is typically going to be limited by shoulder strength, especially when you're benching with more of a powerlifting style bench press, touching fairly low on your chest. The reason is this: essentially the distance between the bar and your shoulder is what's going to dictate how challenging the lift is for your anterior deltoids. So, essentially a bench bar path, you're going to touch here, and the bar is going to come back as you press it out. So when the bar is here, there's a longer distance between where the bar is and where your shoulder is than at really any other point in the movement. So right there at the very bottom of the lift is going to be the most challenging position for your shoulders. And like I said, most people can get the bar moving and stall somewhere in the mid-range. So this would be for those people who, like everyone's going to miss right off their chest if they take way too big of a jump, but let's say you got 315, completed the press, put 320, 325 on, bar just didn't get moving at all. So that would be the people that this applies to. For those people, the shoulder press, overhead press can be a really, really good accessory movement because it is just a really good movement for strengthening your shoulders. And if you do have that characteristic sticking point in the bench, if you do miss at the very bottom, just strengthening your shoulders is probably going to make a pretty big difference for your bench. So if that is where you miss it, I would recommend the overhead press, the shoulder press, as an accessory movement for your bench. However, most people, that's probably not where they're going to miss. And just simply the harder you're training your shoulder press, that's going to detract from how hard you can train your bench. So, just in terms of specificity, if you're substituting out maybe 5 sets of bench a week for 5 sets of overhead press a week, you'd probably be better off doing 5 more sets of bench instead. Now, it is certainly true that if you get a really, really, really good overhead press, just simply because you'll be so strong at pressing in general, that you'll probably also have a pretty respectable bench from that. You see that with a fair amount of weightlifters and some strongmen. Most strongmen still train the bench press, but some of them don't really. They do most of their work overhead, and they can still put up respectable bench numbers if they want to. All I'm saying here is that for most people, that's probably not the most efficient way to improve your bench press. So kind of my own personal anecdote on this. I traditionally haven't put all that much work into my overhead press. And at one point I was benching 435, I believe. And my max strict press was 185, which was terrible. So I just wanted to get my strict press up because I was so bad at it. So I trained it pretty hard for a while, and I didn't slack off on my bench training. It wasn't like I was doing this solely at the expense of benching. I was still training my bench, and I put 90 pounds on my strict press. I got it up to 275, which relative to my bench still wasn't a great overhead press number, but it was at least not like, it wasn't as horrible as it was before. And despite putting, 90 pounds on my overhead press, when I started focusing much harder on the bench again, when I came back to it, my bench was still 435, and it wasn't like a delayed transfer either. I put a really, pretty hard dedicated training cycle into my bench to see if the improved shoulder strength would kind of pay off down the line once some of that fatigue was ameliorated. And no, like 6 weeks later, I'd put, I think, maybe 5 pounds on my bench. So, if anyone were a candidate for improving their shoulder press to pay big dividends for the bench, it would probably be me, just because of how bad my shoulder press was. But despite putting 90 pounds on it and getting it up to a semi-respectable level, it did absolutely nothing for my bench press. But I was never someone who was limited by strength right off of my chest. I could always, get the bar moving, and then kind of missed through that typical mid-range where most people do. So, that's my own experience with attempting to use the overhead press to improve my bench. So I think, kind of playing the long game, I think that if you have the type of acromion process that allows you to tolerate overhead movements well, that's another video topic for another day. But essentially, your acromion process of your scapula, kind of the roof of your shoulder joint, some people just have more room in that joint than others, and so most people can overhead press fine without issue. Other people that don't have quite as much space in that joint, pretty much anything overhead is going to be problematic, or at least increase their impingement risk. But for most people who can tolerate overhead movements fine, I do think that the shoulder press is a good thing just to have kind of in your base programming. So if you're a competitor and you're off-season programming, if you're just a bro just trying to lift to get jacked, a good thing to keep in your programming, because it's a pressing movement where your scapula aren't pinned. And in general, that's probably going to be better just for, shoulder health, resilience in the long run. So similar movements would be like band-resisted push-ups, weighted dips, etc. So I do think that it's a very good movement in its own right. For that reason, just helping you get strong at pressing in general, while also, maybe being a little bit better for shoulder health for most people than the bench press, because your scapula aren't pinned in that immobile position. But like I said, for if you're looking for a movement specifically to improve your bench press, it's probably not going to be the best accessory movement for most people, especially because it's also a pretty taxing movement. And will probably take away from how hard you can train your bench press. However, if you do miss just at the very start of the press, it's a great movement, and it's probably something that if you add it to your training will help your bench press. So that was the first edition. I'll come up with a snappy name for these videos at some point. Not good at that, but until next time, if you have a question, just ask it in the comments below. Or if you're watching this on Facebook, just, same thing, comment below. And if I like your question, I will answer it in the next video. All right, see you guys then.